So I'd have to say my biggest lesson learned has been living a life of continuous improvement, right? To become a lifelong learner, always ask questions, seek out the answers. Cliches of leave no rock unturned, right? It's hard to sometimes address weaknesses. We all have a varying degree of them, big ones, little ones. Just focus in on one weakness at a time, work to address that every day until you can kind of overcome a pitfall, right? Don't ignore the problem. It's a challenge if even somebody on your team, yourself, you have a weakness, that weakness is not going to go away, could even compound, get worse with time. And so to address those, to build on your strengths, to improve yourself personally, professionally, really great things to do in your career, and it will pay off in the long run in your relationships and your future career.
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Today's guest is an accomplished professional within the manufacturing industry with over 13 years of experience. He has successfully led numerous product launches and improvement projects, ranging from cost savings to process and quality initiatives. He has a diverse background in research covering topics such as biomedical, advanced manufacturing, automotive, and laser applications, with 7 co-authored publications, including many about continuous bending under tension, or CBT. He is the manufacturing engineering manager at a contract manufacturing company for medical components. Tim Roemer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jay. It's an honor to be here today with you, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad you could make it and really appreciate you investing the time with us. So, Tim, we'll jump right in. Given your diverse background and your extensive experience, what has been your biggest lesson learned?
So I'd have to say my biggest lesson learned over the past few years has been living a life of continuous improvement, right? To become a lifelong learner, always ask questions, seek out the answers. Cliches of leave no rock unturned, right? And if you're struggling to find that answer, right, find someone that can help you, find someone who knows, bring in those resources to better yourself. Another aspect outside the learning is just to improve yourself, right? Personally, professionally. Lots of ways to do this. You can read books, listen to podcasts, build relationships even in your personal life, your work life, that just push you to be a better person. People that lift you up and challenge you to be better every day. Another thing in that is to chase your passions, right? If you have a strength, if you have a passion for something, use that as fuel to build that even better, right? A great example could be is you're a salesman and you love golf, right? You make connections maybe over the golf course with a potential client, and you share your passion for golf with them, right? You're going to build a relationship there. You're going to build a connection that's probably going to leak into your professional life and get you the sale. Look at even your weaknesses, right? It's hard to sometimes address weaknesses. We all have a varying degree of them, big ones, little ones. Just focus in on one weakness at a time, work to address that every day until you can kind of overcome a pitfall, right? And don't ignore the problem, right? It's a challenge if even somebody on your team, yourself, you have a weakness, that weakness is not going to go away, could even compound, get worse with time. And so to address those, to build on your strengths, to improve yourself personally, professionally, really great things to do in your career, and it will pay off in the long run in your relationships and your future career.
It's outstanding. And in the short time that we've known each other, I've realized the passion that you just have within you, Tim, and it just comes right out. If I may, I will also say that, I have a mentor who's been wonderful for me, and I call him a thought partner, if you will. And I used the word weakness, and he said, no. Lesser strengths, Jay. They're lesser strengths.
Opportunities, right?
Yes, opportunity. That landed for my positive nature. I like what you said about don't ignore the problem too. It
Mm,
doesn't get better with time, right?
yeah. And like
Excellent.
it's hard like as a manager, you try to mitigate sometimes weaknesses of my team, shift resources around, but in the end you're pulling away from potential successes. And
Mhm.
I found that it's better to jump on those weaknesses with your team members, build them up so that way it's not something you have to work around. So
Can I jump back to how have you, and I know you spoke about it, but a little bit more on how would you seek out a mentor, or does a mentor find you, and how does that process happen?
sure. So finding a mentor, I think, is a really hard thing, right? Um, if you get them assigned to you, rarely are they really helpful, right? It's really more something that you stumble upon, right,
Mhm.
in your day-to-day business. And how do you stumble upon it? I'd start with building relationships with everyone you can at work, right? It doesn't have to be in your department, doesn't have to be your manager. It could be a peer, a coworker in a different department. Um, find somebody that if you invest in that relationship is going to make you a better person. They're going to push you harder. Maybe they are somebody with great ideas. Maybe they have a deeper understanding of whatever you're interested in. It might be the workplace technology. It could be your process, your industry, or it could just be somebody that's going to help you grow as an individual. Right? It's great to have somebody with great work ethic on your team, great morals. Right?
Mhm.
Reliable individual who shows up every day when they say they are. Having people that inspire you to do that is really great. So it is a challenge, but even if you can be a mentor for others, that might create more mentors out there.
Excellent. We spoke a bit about avoiding the silos. Could you expand a bit on what that means, and how do you accomplish that, Tim?
Yeah, so silos, when they're in your functional departments and your place of work, right? They really impact your culture. They can impact your productivity. That can translate down to quality issues. It can translate down to delays in deliveries on projects, etc. Um, I think it stems from a place of trust, right? Each department has a different goal, right? If you look at quality, right, they want high quality products. They're not really interested in delivery times. You look at manufacturing, they want machines that run and work consistently. You look at production, they want product to flow out the door. Each one of those are related, but they're all different if you just distill them down into their core functions.
Mhm.
I think that's the siloing is when you start to distill down into your core functions and the trust breaks down. Um, and that can be a challenge, right? As I mentioned, all those things that pop up, I think culture is a huge one, right? Everybody starts becoming toxic and it's a conflict of who can get there first and use this resource. I think ways to overcome that is really is to rebuild that trust, right?
Mhm.
It's making sacrifices for the other teams, right? So when another department asks me to do something, or if they can borrow a resource or get access to a machine, I try to make my answer always yes. Now, there's times that it's times that can't be yes, right? Like just sometimes you just can't. Um, but I try to make it so that it usually is. And then when it's a no, you help them to understand why. I think communication in that mix causes problems, right? If people have to make assumptions, right? Oh, he just doesn't care about my department, doesn't care about my team, doesn't care about my goals. Now you got a problem developing that trust starts to break down. Um, I think some way to help with that is to invite them in, right? Invite them to attend your team meetings, your report outs, your stand ups, so they can see what your problems are, your concerns, your constraints, and just to build relationships with members of their team, other teams, right? Ask them about their day, follow up on big events. Did they get married, have a kid? Check in with them, grab lunch even with other managers, and understand what their challenges at work are because you might be able to help them simply just from past experience or some extra resources that you have.
Thank you for expanding so much on that. And all the points you made are so critical. This is such a universal thing. I believe it is. I've seen it throughout my career and my life. And I guess I have a follow-up question for you then. I love the
Sure.
idea of inviting them into your meetings, having
hmm
them see your challenges. How have you found others to be about letting you into their meeting or their world or their department? And is it reciprocal? Does it need to be? How does that work out?
Luckily, my place of work, we have that nice culture going on right now where people are always invited into other people's meetings. Problem is
Mm.
that now you're invited to every meeting. Um, that's been my problem. I think really it starts first with you, right? If
Right.
everybody's got their wall up, then nobody's going anywhere. So breaking down your walls to let them in, and granted, if it goes bad the first time, just have that discussion, or limit maybe what portion of the meeting they can attend, or whatever needs to happen. You got to be dynamic. You got to be flexible.
Mhm.
Um, but uh, I know we have an open door policy to a lot of our meetings, um, and other departments have started to do that as well. One instance, we have one department where a majority of the attendees are people from other departments now, but they're key to our business, and we want to make sure that they're supported. So,
I have to think the insight and actually the open door, like you said, is extremely helpful. It must build trust.
mm, yeah, and
Yeah.
it's been critical. I've heard stories of the past that my company where that trust wasn't there, and people just dread that time. They talk very poorly about it, about how different it was, and it's a bummer. And I've even seen it in other places I've worked where that siloing progress was just stopped. One
Mm.
department have a great idea, and it just then hit the dead end wall
Mm.
once it hit the next department, and it was just a game of, can my manager get the other manager to respond?
Now, does it happen at the department head or management level only, or is it throughout the department? How do you see that happening?
So I mean, I think the best place to start is management level, right? Because ultimately managers control resources.
Hmm.
But if you're not the manager and that is a problem, I think again that place is to start going and making those relationships, right? Sometimes you can skip your manager and you go ask your buddy in the other department, hey, can I borrow you for an hour to do this thing? And they're like, yeah, I got an hour and 20 minutes. We're just not going to tell our bosses, right? Maybe not the best thing, but you can start to build it from the ground up, right? And when they communicate back to their boss that so and so from another department helped them and it's been really great and they're needing help here, can I help them in my spare time, right? You start to build that relationship, and that kind of habit.
Excellent. I love that. And so there were three key things that you said were really important to you, and one of them is problem solving, Tim. And I love that because, and we joked about how some people don't always want you to solve their problem, right? And that's another half of the story there. But really, with problem solving being a passion of yours, what process do you use? What things do you do? What are the best practices to accomplish this?
Sure. Very early on in my engineering career, I got exposed to Six Sigma, and that really just kind of changed how I looked at engineering problems, right? So it wasn't something taught in school. So many great tools, statistic wise. And so I would say the key there is database decision making, right? And so industry tools out there, you got the DMAIC process, Six Sigma, as I mentioned, A3s, Kaizen events, other lean tools, right? They're out there. They're things that you can get training for your team. I think one holdup for people is that they think they're just engineering tools. The other day, I spent some time training a supervisor on how to do an A3, which is a multi-step structured problem solving tool. Um, because everybody has problems.
Hmm.
And so, yes, these work best when you have data and numbers, and it's easy to work with, and it covers all the details that you want. But there's tons of people problems that you can solve with these processes as well.
Can you give some examples of how you apply that to people?
So you can look at things like, I mean, the typical example you see online in training is like a pizza place, for example, right? You have one set of feedback you're getting. Maybe it's just Google reviews, and one of your pizza stores is getting a 1 star, 2 star, right? You can go through that data set and start to collect information, right? What is the most common thing cited? Is it delivery time? Is it the staffing service? Is it the quality of your food? And then from that data, you can then start to go seek out other data, right? Maybe you put a time tracking in your vehicles that are doing delivery so that you can see how long it is taking them to get there. From that information, you can start to build up to solutions to those problems, right? And so really it's how you collect that data is really important, right? If you have bad
Mhm.
data, you're going to make bad decisions. So you need to make sure that you have reliable data. Try to not get it to be biased data. Um, Otherwise, Yeah, it's just not going to go well when you
Mm.
implement a change.
What advice would you give people who haven't been, exposed to A3 or Kaizen or, Six Sigma? What advice would you give them to begin approaching this process, or how would they start?
Sure. There's YouTube, right? There's lots
Mhm.
of information on YouTube. I know LinkedIn's got some video series on those tools. Now, those aren't going to go in very deep. They're going to tell you a high level approach, kind of create some ways of thinking.
Mhm.
Um, for certain tools like Six Sigma, for example, that's a multi-week training with a professional who usually has a black belt in the topic. Um, so that's something you'd have to find a trainer for and go do that. But other things like Kaizen events, sometimes you can bring in contractors to run a Kaizen event for you. And if you get enough experience, you could start hosting them yourself. So like I had attended a few Kaizen events and learned as much as I could there, and eventually did some online learning. And now I lead them.
Mm.
Um, that wasn't a professional training, but we get through it. They're successful. Everybody has a good time. So it's definitely something people can figure out on their own if they need to. But there's always people to pull in as consultants.
I love it. Great advice and an easy way to start, really. I mean,
Mm.
everyone has, most people have access to YouTube. So, yeah,
Yeah,
that's great
YouTube's
start.
pretty great.
It sure is. So I want to jump back a little bit, Tim. You shared
Mhm.
with me recently that you have a teaching background, and how has this background as a teacher helped you in your current role, your career, your life?
Yeah, so I guess I've always enjoyed, and my fam. I was thinking about it the other day with my wife, and my family enjoys sharing what they know, right? Whether it's a skill, whether it's a tidbit of information, that act of telling somebody else is enjoyable for us. So there's always been a little bit of bug in me to want to teach. I really fleshed it out though in graduate school. I was a teaching assistant, and I enjoyed helping the students, and really enjoyed that whole experience. And that got me to question, hey, do I want to become a professor one day? But it was a big jump, right, to get that
Mhm.
PhD, invest 6, 7, 8 years into that career path. And so I decided that I would try teaching at high school level, and eventually became a high school boarding school teacher, teaching math, science, engineering for about 2 years. Um, it was great. I was able to build a STEM program. I was able to create some of my own courses, really chase after kids' passions for specific topics, which was rewarding for me. But I eventually missed problem solving. I missed my own projects. I missed being an engineer. So since returning back to engineering, I've had co-ops and interns. Right, I enjoyed mentoring and guiding them. Um, when I became a continuous improvement lead, I would also got to be able to train large groups again, and so that was really rewarding, creating content for them to learn. Um, but it was detached. It was more of like a project manager in that role. I still didn't really have projects, direct reports, teams I was working on. I was more independent. So I think I found my calling more with management. Now I have a team that I can work with, I can train, I can build up and invest in, um, and still be involved in projects and take on new opportunities and challenges for myself. And so one thing I've done with my team is in New Hampshire, state of New Hampshire, the state has a job training fund, and this is a grant that you can apply for that will cover up to 50% of your training costs. So we did that last year. We're finalizing the process this year, and it's been really great getting my team exposed to problem solving skills, project management, quality requirements, lean tools, and not only my team, but other teams at my company, other departments involving them, taking into account what their interests are.
I have several questions on everything you just shared, Tim. It's fantastic. And so I want to jump right back to the teaching aspect again.
Sure.
Clearly that was rewarding, and it's great of you and humble of you to say, look, I missed my own projects, and that was a void, and
Mm,
you got back to it. So for those of us, our listeners, myself, who aren't or weren't teachers,
mhm.
what advice would you give us? What skills would you encourage us to build so that we could apply similar abilities that you employ with your team?
Sure. I mean, there's some more soft skills that I picked up from teaching, right? Public presenting, um, creating content for teaching people, making sure I have engaging presentations, and when I train, making sure my tools are engaging, right? It's not just a PowerPoint that I read off of. There's activities, there's um, opportunities for people to give their input, their thought, right? So it's not just sit there and let me teach at you. It's let's learn together. I have some things that I'm going to teach you, but we all might teach something else to one another. How to get those opportunities? I know with the presenting, when I was in grad school, we were asked to present on a regular basis. So that really prepared me for teaching. Every biweekly, I had to present my research status to fellow graduate students and then multiple professors, and they would nail you if you were off course. If you just were boring, they'd give you feedback that you need to be more engaging. If you were inaccurate with your content, they'd rip that apart for you. Um, so that was really good. That really built up my presenting skills, which was very helpful when it came time to teach.
Yeah,
Um,
I like it. Just jump in quickly. I love that. So seek, what I'm hearing is seek opportunities to present every time
yeah,
you can.
yeah. I
Okay.
mean, even as
Yeah.
if you're a manager, like forcing your team to to present every week. Like I mean, I don't have them presenting on their projects every week right now, but um, what I do have is a standard meeting where they will present their yield data to me, any open actions. Now we're not standing up and developing special PowerPoints for this or anything like that, but it's still opportunities to speak in front of your peers and even share your weaknesses, your struggles, and sometimes somebody else jumps in. Like that round table environment, it's really great. I had a really great manager that started that idea with me is to have your team sit in a round table and give feedback to each other, help
Mhm.
each other. Hey, I did that 10 years ago. Here, let me show you how to do it so you don't waste another month of time.
Mm. I'm a huge fan of the roundtable approach as well, because you
Mm,
don't know what you might learn, and you get
yeah.
great feedback.
Hmm.
I want to also touch on the grant, because yours is the state of New Hampshire. I know
Hmm.
Massachusetts has one as well, and other states, for other listeners who might be online listening here.
Hmm.
How do they begin that? What do you do? What advice would you give around that?
So we've been lucky. We've been working with a training group that actually helps you through the grant process. So they're aware of all the existing grants out there, and when you approach them for training, uh, they help you draft the request application. They know what key aspects you need. They help you to tweak it to make sure that it meets the requirements. Um, so I've been working with one particular group, and that has been very fruitful and a good time saver on my side as well, putting together that application and coordinating all the different trainings. They have the training. So that's kind of the deal is they have trainers and trainings that you choose from, and then they help you get the grant to help you pay for it.
Hmm.
I think Massachusetts covers 100% of the costs, I believe. Um, as long as you pay your employees to attend the meeting, the trainings. In New Hampshire, very similar, but only 50% of the cost.
What a great benefit for employers.
Yeah, no, it's definitely helps with the budget. A- and what I really like about it is just you're investing in your employees,
Mm.
and that only not only benefits them in their future, but it also benefits your company, right? Your team,
Hmm.
and so it's really a win-win-win. Uh, and it's we've polled our teams to see what topics they had interest in, polled other managers what topics they had interest in. I mean, ultimately, you still have a budget, um, but trying to hit those big topics where there's weakness, uh, opportunity for improvement is kind of the goal there.
Amazing. Excellent. Um, we touched, I think you and I briefly talked about onboarding and training. And
Hmm.
you're a very clearly a very process-driven individual. And this is a topic that comes up a lot on the show and in life and in business. Can you tell us a little bit about your process for onboarding and training new team members? What are the challenges, and what advice might you give?
Sure. My process is kind of that mentorship idea, right?
Mhm.
Or assigning them a trainer, right? So if I have a new engineer join the team, I try to pair them up with somebody who does similar work, somebody that will be transferring projects over, right? We don't want a cold turkey, just cut them off. Here you go. Here's your project. Good luck. I have a period of transition, right? That's probably going to be 3 months, maybe a little bit more, depending on the difficulty of the topic. Um, Having that opportunity for them to be paired with somebody who knows the content, knows the struggles, knows who to reach out to, um, really speeds up that transition time. As a manager, being available, right, for questions. There's some questions the fellow coworkers might not know.
Mhm.
A big thing I try to do is be a point of contact for other resources, right? Hey, I have this problem. I might not know the answer, but I know somebody who does or who might know the answer. So sending them along the way to go get to that person, making the introduction early on. Um, Another great thing is having new members meet everybody on all the teams, right? Sit down with every functional department manager at a company so that way you can see what does this group do, who are the key people in that, how might we interact with each other. Just really speeds up the integration process.
That's a really good idea. I like that, all of it. But yeah, meeting with the different department heads, basically
Mm.
is what I heard. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fantastic, Tim.
Another great tool too is this is a little newer for us. It's called standard work. Essentially, it's a template document defining out what a role's responsibilities are on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis. And then with that, how often you're doing them. And it gives a really nice template for a new hire to see, all right, these are all the things I'm expected to do one day. And these are the topics I can start asking questions, checking
Mhm.
off. Yeah, I understand how to do this. I don't know what to do here. I need to go ask somebody. Um, so there's different methods out there. There's leader standard work for all the way down from operator all the way up to executive.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a new tool for us. Definitely some challenges for me with it. I have my own structure, so um, learning around that as we're standardizing it. But it's really great as you get more towards tasks that are the same every day. It's a really great tool.
Hmm. You just mentioned challenges. I want to pick it apart a little because I know you have very good process, but what are some of the biggest or most common challenges? Because we all face them, right? And when
Mhm.
your process, I don't want to say when your process breaks down, but what are the biggest challenging parts of this too? Because in the whole process sounds fantastic. Where are the stucks and how do you handle those?
For onboarding,
Yes. Yep.
yes.
I want to jump to project management too, because that's
Yeah.
what I'm going to ask you. This very similar question about that.
So for onboarding, biggest challenges. Um, Part of it can be who you hire, what's that personality type, right? Hopefully you would filter that out
Mhm.
in your interview process. But everybody's different, right? Some people aren't as eager, some people aren't as hungry. Those are traits that I really enjoy in an employee. Um, and so when that's not there, right, it's bouncing back to the passions maybe, right? Like what really gets that employee motivated? Can you give them more of that? And then that might leak into their other behaviors, their other tasks.
Mhm.
Um, Another challenge can be culture, right? Like it doesn't have to be race culture or worldly culture. It could just be I have a bunch of introverts and I just brought on board an extrovert, right?
Mm.
Like that's
Mhm.
a culture
Oh,
shock for
yes.
both of them.
Sure.
Especially engineers tend to be a little more introverted. Um, it's actually very funny. Our management team is like 90% extroverts, except for our lead manager who's an introvert. So yeah, it's it's a neat culture dynamic.
Oh, and it's a study in personalities, right? It's a study in
Yeah.
how we all interact with each other and how can we be
hmm
effective with that.
hmm and just
But,
being self-aware too, right? Like just
yes.
because I'm excited doesn't mean somebody else has to be excited. That's it's not nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
Um, so just balancing those teams and having fun with it too, I think is not being overly serious.
Yeah. Great advice. Great advice. I wanted to jump back to the one thing with project management. Yeah, what are you seeing as opportunities, and what could you share with our listeners? What makes for a challenging project, and what how do you work around it, and what makes it successful?
So the challenge I think goes up as you involve more parties, right?
Mm.
So if you're starting off with this is just my project, I don't need anybody else, right? You have your technical challenges.
Mhm.
As you add more departments internal, external, customers are involved, right? This starts to really escalate quickly. There's a lot of personalities, there's a lot of conflicting interests, different priorities amongst those groups, where one group, this might be their biggest and only priority. And then for the next group, it's one of 30.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and projects like that can get very messy very quickly. Again, it goes back to that trust. It goes back to that communication. If you don't have good communication, you're not trusting somebody on that team who has a lot of eggs in their basket, right? You're going to get problems.
Mm.
Um, and then customers feel and see that sometimes too. I think it's really important to make sure you have a unified face with the customer. Your leaders in your projects, right? Your project manager, your program managers, are really connected with everyone, connecting everyone, pushing hard when there is an issue, right? If somebody's not delivering, they're pushing. Um, and also maybe you just need to be, instead of pushing, helping.
Mm.
There's if you're like, well, I did my stuff and theirs isn't done, that's their problem, right? That's not helping the end goal.
Well,
Um,
that's like the silos, right?
yeah, yeah, it,
Mm.
it is. So siloing within a project that is multi-department is a really great way to tank that project quickly. Um, so it really goes back up to that leadership standpoint is who's your leader? How are they
Mhm.
leading?
Mhm.
Are they inspirational? Are they helping everyone get to the point they need to get to? Or are they more watching and letting the pieces fall? It's
Mhm.
not just PowerPoint updates, Gantt charts, and meeting minutes, right? It's that you got to be there on site. You got to be there in the team. You got to be supporting the big events, the major milestones, making sure that they do go well. And
Mm.
then if not, you're the one with all the resources, right? Start pulling those resources to support.
Great advice. Yep. Thank you, Tim. Thank you for sharing all of that wisdom and experience. Well, we've been learning from you so much for the past however many minutes we've been talking here, and I know you have a very interesting and awesome background, and I'm sure everyone would like to learn a bit more about you. You know, how did you come to be who you are today?
Sure. Well, I guess it kind of all started with a love of sci-fi. I didn't mention this before. I'm a big Star Wars fan. I got my background blurred, but if you saw it, there'd be a bunch of Star Wars stuff. Um,
Awesome.
so sci-fi is a neat intersection, right? There's that creativity side, and then you got your science side. And so
Hmm.
I love the science, right? It's you can measure it, you can see it, it's logical, it flows, but then it's fun having that the fake side, right? The dreaming side, the side that allows you to be creative and like push the boundaries. It's
Hmm.
fun seeing like technology from Star Trek 20, 30 years ago is now like in our hands, right? Tablets. Like they had that in Star Trek. And it kind of inspired the iPad. Um, and so very cool things from that inspired me really to become an engineer. It was, well, I want to go to space and fly in a spaceship. What can I do to do that? Maybe I need to go do that myself. I'm not doing that today, but that's okay. Maybe somebody else will.
I didn't know
Uh,
this about you. This is great.
yeah.
Tell
Uh,
more.
um, and my wife and I and our three children. I have three daughters: a 1 year old, a 4 year old, and a 6 year old. Um, we live in Manchester, New Hampshire. My wife stays at home with them and homeschools them. Um, Very active with family. My in-laws own a gymnastics gym in Hooksett, New Hampshire, so the kids are in that. My wife works there
Mm.
occasionally when time allows. All my in-laws work there, so we're really involved with that. It's great to see the kids grow and be challenged there mentally, physically. Um, and so that's always a fun aspect of our daily lives.
So we just found out about sci-fi and Star Wars, and now I'm going to ask, what would today's Tim give for advice to, say, the 20-year-old Tim? Or, like what would you, now that you know what you know, what would you tell yourself, your younger self?
It's interesting. It's like sometimes those mistake steps, right? Like part of me was like, oh, why did I do a teacher? I could have had that many more years in engineering, and that might have put me in a further place in my career. Um, but retrospect, I always like to look at things of everything has a purpose, right? Everything has a reason for it happening. And I always try to reflect on that as like, what was the reason why this bad thing, this challenging thing, this seemingly wasteful thing happened to me? Um, and so in a way, I kind of don't want to tell myself in the past, like the teaching thing, right? I learned so many skills from that. It helped a ton as a parent. The times I had to wake up in the middle of the night to go help a student in the dorms, right? Like
Mm,
nobody wants to be doing that, but I do that now every night with my kids.
good parallel right there. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It
Mhm.
was a big shock being an engineer having to go deal with them. I call them non-technical problems. Those ones are harder than the technical problems.
That's
Um,
true. That's very true.
yeah.
Makes sense.
Hmm.
Awesome, Tim. I can't think of your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience. I'm sure everyone listening has learned so much. I know I have. Um, and so,
Thank you.
how would people get in touch with you? What would you recommend if people wanted to reach out, learn more about things that you've taught them or said? What do you recommend?
Sure. I think LinkedIn's probably the best place to reach me.
Okay.
Tim Roemer's my name. If you search engineering, you won't get the politician. Um, uh, I message me over that, add me on that. I try to add as many people as I can. As long as you're not trying to sell me something, I'll respond. So
Excellent. That's how we met. Yeah, we
yes,
met on LinkedIn. So
yes, I gave you
outstanding.
the wait period to make sure you weren't trying to sell me something first. So
Never. No, no, no. Well, Tim, I cannot thank you enough for being on the show and really investing your time and your experience and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you so much.
no problem. And thank you for inviting me.
Of
It's been
course.
great.
And for our listeners, thank you so much for listening in. If you learned something or laughed, tell someone about the show. And, Tim, thanks again. And another exciting episode of Facility Rockstars. We'll see everybody next time. It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.